Good morning. I'm Kevin Simmons. I'm from Florida in the United States. I've known Tom and Alba Orbital for several years, and I'm really glad to be able to share a little bit with you about the Wolfpack CubeSat development team and our first CubeSat effort. So I work with Shauna Christensen, who is also here, and we work with a group of students that are primarily 10 to 18 years old. And the idea is, if we can help these students fail quite a bit and do these ridiculous engineering tasks like launch satellites, especially before they get to college, we can help them become good teammates, we can help them with their soft skills, we can help them learn how to network, and then in addition to that, they get all of this excitement of having built something that goes to space. And so to accomplish that, because I don't like the way that the U.S. education system works, I actually created companies, 2 LLCs, one with Shauna, and 2 nonprofits. And we actually have a conference called the Small Set Education Conference. I'll share more about it later. But we created a conference literally so that more students in the part of the country where I live could attend a satellite conference, because the really big one on the other side of the country was just too expensive. So we created companies as a means to give students opportunities. So in all of these companies, there are teenagers that do the work. Because as an educator, when I go to network or connect with other companies, if I just go as a teacher, I look like someone with their hand out wanting a donation. But if we have a corporation or a company that does real aerospace, we get the kids and we get treated with more respect. So our approach, we sort of jokingly started calling it the techies and the talkies, but it really does work. Sean is a National Speech and Debate Coach of the Year. So when you have young people, the soft skills, I think, is probably the most important work that we do in helping them understand how to be a good engineer or a good aerospace, in that field. So we compete. We teach the kids to build networks. Our kids advocate and lobby at the state and the national level for aerospace and education issues. And then we also encourage them to find a lane of research that they really enjoy. And then we encourage them to not only do that work, but to write, to publish, and then to present it. So our kids since 2018 have presented over 110 papers in 8 countries. And what's really cool about it is we never tell the conference that they're 12 or 14. We just let the conference judge the paper on its own merit. And when the paper is accepted, that is our excuse to travel and, see the world and do really neat things. The project we're going to talk about today was actually supposed to be a student presenting it, but he actually advanced to the highest level he could in our science and engineering fair in the U.S. So he's competing this week in the U.S., and that's why he's not here presenting this paper. But you can see just last year we went several places, and I met these great guys like Franco here. Franco and I have now run into each other in Dubai and Italy, and now here again in Glasgow. So I'm really glad to see you guys, and I'm hoping to get some input from you. Okay, so we actually do a lot of outreach as well, both locally and internationally. So one of the things we're trying to do is take this Wolfpack CubeSat development team model and then find other like-minded educators and students, because candidly, I don't think there's a better way to train your 21st century STEM and aerospace workforce than by building small satellites. It's multidisciplinary, so students have to sort of specialize in a lane, but they need to understand the entire satellite. They cannot do everything on their own. They need to be great communicators. They need to be persuasive. One of the very first things we do with the Wolfpack is when we decide what will our next satellite be, is the kids compete within them, within the team itself for what should be our next mission. So I never tell the students what is our next satellite. I let them figure out what is a good idea, and then they have to convince enough of their teammates that that's the direction that we'll go. But What's really interesting is we're going to try to start a Wolfpack group in Tokyo. And I actually am, because of ITAR restrictions in the U.S., we're going to help some Japanese students build some of their first pre-college CubeSats or ThinSats or even PocketQubes, but get them launched from Japan on a Japanese rocket. Also helping the first pre-college team in Switzerland build a CubeSat. It was actually a student that Shauna and I taught when he was in the 6th grade. Now he's in high school, and he's built a CubeSat team in Switzerland. So great opportunities for kids there. So very quickly, what's unique about the Wolfpack is the students that we work with. We were the first in the U.S., what we call middle school. That's basically ages 11 to 14 team that was selected by NASA for the CubeSat launch initiative. If you're unfamiliar with CSLI, CSLI is an opportunity in the United States for universities or companies or organizations like ours, a nonprofit, to get a free ride to space, which cut our budget in half, right? That takes such a burden off of the fundraising, right? The hardest part for us, for me, is just raising the money for the kids to get their rides, right? Because what I really love about the small sat community is how collaborative everyone is. When our students go to conferences like SmallSat or our SmallSat Education Conference or PocketQube, they always come away having had great engagements and building their networks and getting good advice, which I'm hoping you guys will do for us today. This was our first and second satellites. We were selected in 2017. We launched our first CubeSat, a 1U, in 2018. 11-year-old young lady read a paper about dirty comets seeding life on other planets. So they shed ice, and if they're extremophile life forms, perhaps dirty comets are seeding life on other planets. So we built a biological payload around that very idea. And flying living things on small sats is difficult if you can't late load, right? If you're going up to the ISS and the astronauts are going and you can slip your nice Pelican case with your styrofoam, the nice comfortable ride for your satellite up to the ISS, that's one thing. But if you're just flying a biological payload on a rocket that gets deployed directly into space, the difficult thing is we often have to put the CubeSat on the shelf after we integrate for 30 or 60 days. So that becomes very difficult. So with our first mission, we actually lyophilized the bacteria. We sort of freeze-dried it so it could be inert, and we would not have to provide nutrients or gas exchange while we waited for the rocket ride. Our second satellite, 7th grade young man, goes to a conference in Utah. He's 12 or so. He says, what if we fly a dead satellite and use capacitors and then we only charge it when it gets on orbit? And NASA liked that idea enough, so they gave us a free ride for that. So that was our 2 for 2 with NASA for free rides. The real world is the next 8 proposals we submitted to NASA, they turned us down. So that's the world we live in also, which is how do you get the ride? How do you get finance the rides? Especially if you're not a big company. So our second satellite flew in 2022. Our first mission went out of Vandenberg into a sun sync orbit with SSOA. Our second mission went to the ISS on a cargo resupply mission. What I like is the vibe test requirements when you ride in that comfortable Pelican case up to the space station. That's a very comfortable, easy ride. 3 terrifying moments for a pre-college satellite team, right? Always the vibe test. I don't know if you guys, the very first time we did a vibe test, we did it at Kennedy Space Center, and we sheared one of our solar panels off. And that's pretty terrifying because we, like most rookie teams, did not leave enough time for testing and problem solving. You just sort of presume that things are going to go like you draw them up. And now, having done this for a few years, you can never leave enough time for testing and fixing whatever mess you made. And that's really one of the learning points for the kids is we basically let them fail their way to success. The kids and I, we're not sure. We're not experts in this field, but having them try and fail and then solve their own problems, I often tell them, I don't care what you do, but you should be able to justify why you made a certain decision. So, first and second mission, 2018 and 2022. Our third mission launched on Transporter 11. That was a hosted payload. So this young man tried twice in middle school to have his ID. His proposal was rejected by NASA a couple of times. So his friend says, I'm going to start a foundation and I'm going to raise the money for the hardware and the launch. So that's what we did. And a hosted payload was much less expensive for us to still fly our payload. So this was looking at bit flips. Does anyone here have maybe kids or know of something called a microbit? Anybody work with microbits? So we're the first mission, as far as we know, to fly microbits in space because we were looking for bit flips. And we needed something that was incredibly not appropriate for use in space. So it's a $30 little processor that has a great emulator online, free, where the kids can toggle between sort of like a block coding where you snap the images together to write code, and then you can toggle between that and the Python. So we were looking at, Theo was looking at error correcting code and watchdog timers and different amounts of polyethylene shielding. So that's the mission that launched on Transporter 11 last August. And this is our fourth mission. This is the one we're building now. This is WolfSat 1. This is our first time that we're going to fly on Firefly. So again, there was a national competition where if you were selected, you get a free ride. Cuts our budget's requirements in half. So this mission, I was a biochemist before I was an educator, and I'm really a generalist. I'm not a master of anything. And this mission, we're going to fly a bacteria called Vibrio natriagens. It's found in like estuaries and salty mud, and it has enzyme pathways that allow it to digest single-use plastics. So we're very concerned about things like microplastics. So what we envision is humans are able to go on long-term crewed space missions in the future, and you have to repurpose every molecule, right? We cannot throw any molecules overboard. You can't throw the trash out because we need that mass. We need those molecules. So imagine, if you will, a compost pile. Instead of it being organic materials, you use life forms, you use biologicals to degrade inorganic materials like plastics. So that's what this mission is. So we're going to fly that on a Firefly Alpha launch vehicle late this year. And this is really cool because my university, my alma mater, they don't do a lot of spacecraft, North Carolina State University, but they have a really good chemical and biomolecular engineering department. So we had to figure out a way to keep these bacteria alive for the 30 to 60 days before, after integration, before we launch. So what's neat about this bacteria, it already lives in salt. We could not lyophilize it. But my friends at NC State, this lab, figured out the bacteria already is a halophile. It likes a salty environment. They figured out if we used an extra salty kind of media, we can actually make the bacteria dormant for up to 70 days without having to provide it any sources of carbon like glucose, any sugars, and we don't have to worry about gas exchange. So we're going to oversalt the bacteria, and then we're going to integrate them. And then when we get to orbit, we have a thin film of BHET, one of the components of plastic, and we're going to watch the bacteria and look at the enzyme activity of that bacteria in orbit. So that's our fourth mission. All right. I think I've gilded the lily enough about what we did in the past. Now it's time for this mission that's just begun. These are photos from 2019. The first time we met Alba Orbital guys. We were at the conference in Utah. We're staying in dormitories. And every day I'd send the kids out, and they had to meet with vendors that we had never worked with before and build a notional satellite that had some mission. And at the end of the day, the kids had networked with vendors all day, and they would come back and say, all right, this is the satellite that we propose. And they'd say, here's our EPS and our comms and our solar panels and et cetera. So we'd have them do these briefings in the common area of the dorm rooms that we're staying in. And these two dudes in kilts started hanging out, listening to our kids. and it was the Alba Orbital team. So this is the first time that we met Alba Orbital, was 2019. Some of these kids you see here, they're doing really well in colleges and universities. They're all STEM kids. But I just want to let you know that the little impacts that you guys can have on students now will pay off later. You may not even recognize it, but it will. So our first PocketQube, we decided we would do a PocketQube, having done 4 CubeSats, after Alba did this sort of, I'm going to call it speed dating. So they allowed 10 speakers 5 minutes. And they had a stinking bullhorn too, right? If you ran over an air horn, you got 5 minutes to share your mission. It was such a great thing. And we got inspired right then that we're going to do a PocketQube. Well, the kid leading this team is that I chose, he is super rookie and he's 13, right? So I'm going to have hopefully 5 or 6 more years with him, and we are going to literally fail our way to getting this PocketQube built and launched. And I believe it will be successful, but I think it'll take at least 3 years. So with the young people, we always start with, what is your mission statement, right? Why are you going to space? Why must you build a satellite to accomplish whatever your research question is? So they chose capture low-res images of specifically clouds. Again, I'm less concerned about what mission they choose, but do they have a good justification for it? And we have no PocketQube experience at all. All right, so here's some of their thoughts. I'm sorry that the students weren't here to present it, but they would tell you things like, we don't know enough about things like cloud thickness. So I shared these 2 images, and you'll get the humor in this a little later. The kids are trying, they want to build a Lamborghini on a moped budget, right? They want to build, they always get, you have to de-scope projects with young people, right? Because they think you can, send high-def video in little small byte packets of telemetry. So they're always trying to do too much. So this is important that they learn constraints and how to optimize with their mission. So this is what this is their mission statement, and they saw these as the missions or things that we could accomplish. And here are some of their thoughts. So I'm trying to present this as if they would. They recognize the benefits of using a PocketQube. They really do. They also recognize, and they've really butted heads with all the constraints of the PocketQube, even more so than the CubeSat, especially the size. So they use limited space, that was their words, but it's really the volume, right? You have such a limited amount of volume. It's a wonderful constraint to make kids make choices. So I found that PDR for a 12-year-old is terrifying. So what we do is we get engineers from NASA or companies, nice row of tables, and the kids get up there like the Inquisition and they just do their best. And what happens is they end up with 100 questions and they find out 50 things they hadn't considered or did wrong. But it's a wonderful learning experience. So I like the PDR. So what we did is I came up with a PDR template that the students use as a guiding document as they start preparing and planning their mission. And it's nothing really IP. I just took every great source I can. There's some of you in here, like Jen Kang. I've known him for a long time, and he's always been really good at what he does. So you sort of borrow from the people you see that do things well. So they arbitrarily chose a 2P form factor before they figured out their mission, which was a really fun thing. Is we take 2 steps forward and then they have to take a step back because they've not planned properly. So I made this, this is our document, this PDR, and it's just a single piece of paper, but it has 32 components. And all they have to do is populate answers to all 32 parts, and then we're ready for a PDR. So you can see it's pretty standard stuff. I have some images here. Oh, apologies. But young people, they don't know. They really don't even know what they don't know. So the PDR is a wonderful way, I think, to help train young people to be very deliberate in what they do. So These are some of their choices, right? Budget is always an issue. Young people, I never put the burden on them to raise the money for the missions, but I want them to be aware. And in fact, I really love spider diagrams. I'm a visual learner. You have to know the learning modality of every kid has a different way that they learn. If it's not in a chart or some kind of infographic or something, I'm a pictures guy. Spider diagrams are wonderful. So when we do camps, even with rookies in a summer camp, it's always the iron triangle, right? You're not going to change scope, time, and cost, right? You're not going to change one of those without messing around with the other. But I love satellites because we think about 5 variables for the kids. So this spider diagram, you think about size, mass, power, data budget, and power budget. When you get young people thinking about those, now it becomes all these trade-offs, right? So I feel like this is the most important thing that the Wolfpack does is not build satellites, but we call it human capital development, right? So we train the workforce. We want to help students find these career paths. So I really like the spider diagrams, but they made some choices with a camera and an Arduino. I really think that they're going to end up having to choose to build a 3P and not a 2P because they simply can't get all their stuff in, what they want to accomplish with a 2P. So that brings me near the end. I put up this QR code because I made a simple Google form because in a room full of subject matter experts, I suspect that you have a lot of advice that you might share with these young people. And this Google form really just says, what advice might you share with this really young team? If you would. There's a little information about our conference there as well. So if you wouldn't mind, if you'd like to help the next generation follow in your footsteps, this would be great. We have a podcast. If you'd like to, Sean and I do a podcast called Let's Go to Space, Blue Sky Learning. We have about 150 episodes. It's a great way to get you to tell your story to us. We only need about 30 minutes. We do it by Zoom, and then we post the video part of the Zoom on our YouTube after your podcast episode drops. We'd love to have you tell your story so that we can share it, and then we use it to help train our kids as well. And so here's the last thing I want to share is we started a conference 4 years ago. Jen has been there since the very beginning. It was too expensive to take my kids across the U.S. to Utah for a week to do this great big satellite conference called SmallSat. So we started the SmallSat Education Conference at Kennedy Space Center inside the visitor complex so that students and teachers could hear from, say, university teams and companies as to how they could get involved with high-altitude balloons, ThinSats, PocketQubes, CubeSats. That's the whole goal of the conference. So we keep the costs incredibly low. I think for students, we charge $35, right, for a day-and-a-half conference with 40 talks. So here is the information on the conference. We think we'll hit 1,000 people this year. My goal is to have Tom sort of oversee maybe a PocketQube track within our conference if we get enough papers in that lane. And so that's our goal. Don't know about time, but I really appreciate your attention. Thank you.